Welcome to Storytelling and Beyond, where you are tuned to for yet another interesting emotional motivational story. Subscribe, stay tuned, and enjoy the story. The grand estate stood under the golden glow of the evening sun, its towering walls hiding secrets darker than its luxurious facade suggested. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the kind that settled deep into the bones of those who lived there. The stepmother, a woman of sharp features and an even sharper tongue, sat in her velvet chair, her lips curling into a sinister smile as she put the final touches on her cruel plan. She had always resented her stepdaughter, not because the girl had done anything wrong, but because of what she represented. Purity, kindness, and grace, qualities the stepmother could never possess. And so, she had decided that the best way to destroy the girl was not through shouting or punishment, but through something far more humiliating. The doors to the study creaked open, and the stepdaughter walked in, her presence a quiet contrast to the room's heavy atmosphere. She was dressed in a simple but elegant gown, her posture straight but not proud. There was an innocence in her eyes, the kind that had not yet learned the full cruelty of the world. "You called for me, stepmother?" Her voice was gentle, respectful, despite knowing that love would never be returned. The stepmother's lips twisted into a mockery of a smile. "Yes, my dear. I have wonderful news for you. Your engagement has been arranged." For a moment, time seemed to stop. The girl's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with possibilities. Had fate finally smiled upon her? Had someone seen beyond her stepmother's cruelty and offered her a future of kindness? But then came the stepmother's next words, delivered slowly, deliberately, like a blade being pressed against soft skin. "He is waiting for you outside." The girl turned toward the window, her fingers tightening on the folds of her dress. Below, in the courtyard, stood a man in tattered clothes, his posture slightly hunched, his feet bare against the cold stone. A beggar. Her breath hitched, but she forced herself to stay calm. She could already hear the muffled giggles of the servants who had been let in on the stepmother's cruel game. "Surely, there is some mistake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The stepmother stood, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. "No mistake, dear. This is your fate. You should be grateful I found someone willing to take you at all." A test. That's what this was. A test of how far humiliation could push a person before they broke. The girl could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes waiting, expecting her to cry, to beg, to collapse under the shame. But she did none of those things. She took a slow breath and turned to face her stepmother. There was no anger in her gaze, no hatred. Only something far more dangerous. Calm defiance. "Very well," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "If this is my fate, then I accept it." A stunned silence filled the room. The stepmother's smile faltered, the servants shifted uncomfortably. No one had expected this. Without waiting for permission, the girl walked past her stepmother, her steps firm, her dignity untouched. If she was to face humiliation, she would do so with her head held high. And though no one knew it yet, this single act of quiet strength would change everything. The grand hall of the estate was draped in gold and crimson, its chandeliers casting an artificial warmth over a gathering that was anything but welcoming. Servants scurried around, ensuring that the engagement ceremony was flawless, not out of respect for the bride-to-be, but because the mistress of the house had demanded it. The stepmother, dressed in opulent silks, sat among the guests, a glass of wine in hand, her lips curled into a smug smile. She had spread the word far and wide, ensuring that the most important families in town were in attendance. This was to be her masterpiece, a humiliation so profound that the girl would never recover from it. And then, the moment arrived. The doors creaked open, and the stepdaughter stepped into the hall, her figure poised yet delicate, wrapped in an elegant yet modest dress. There was no trembling in her fingers, no hesitation in her step. She walked as though she were entering the ceremony of any noblewoman, not one designed to disgrace her. Murmurs rippled through the room. How could she remain so calm? Had she not realized what was about to happen? And then, the sound that many had been waiting for, the heavy, uneven footsteps of the groom. The beggar entered. Gasps filled the hall as the crowd took in his appearance. His clothes were frayed, his face shadowed with exhaustion, his feet bare against the polished marble floor. He carried himself with neither arrogance nor shame, merely standing as though the opinions of the rich meant nothing to him. The stepmother hid a delighted smirk behind her wineglass, waiting, no, craving, for the moment the girl would crack, would crumble under the weight of humiliation. But once again, she did not. Instead, she turned to the beggar and bowed her head in greeting. "You must be my fiancé," she said, her voice steady. The hall fell into a stunned silence. The beggar tilted his head, studying her. He had expected fear, revulsion, or perhaps even anger. But there was none of that in her eyes. Only quiet acceptance. The stepmother stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble. "Well," she said, voice sharp. "Do you accept your fate?" All eyes turned back to the girl. The moment was here, the moment she was supposed to break. But instead, she took a deep breath and smiled, not for them, but for herself. "Yes," she said, looking at the beggar with a gaze unshaken. "I accept." The hall erupted, not in applause, but in whispers, in disbelief, in the quiet unraveling of the stepmother's carefully laid plans. The beggar, too, was caught off guard. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, as if trying to decipher the depth of this woman's soul. And then, something unexpected happened. A small, knowing smile tugged at the corner of his lips. The game had changed. And none of them had any idea what was coming next. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city as the engagement ceremony ended. The guests had left in hushed confusion, whispering among themselves about the spectacle they had witnessed. The girl had not broken. She had not run. She had accepted her fate with a quiet strength that had unsettled them all. In the stepmother's chambers, rage simmered beneath her carefully composed exterior. She had expected an evening of disgrace, of laughter at the expense of the girl she despised. Instead, she had been made to watch as her stepdaughter carried herself with a dignity that even the wealthiest of noble women failed to match. But the night was not yet over. The stepdaughter sat by the dim glow of a single lantern in her small room, staring out at the darkened sky. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine from the gardens below, but she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, tangled in questions she could not answer. Who was this man she had been given to? And why had he agreed to such a cruel arrangement? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She hesitated before rising to open it. The beggar stood there. Gone was the audience, the whispers, the judging gazes. It was just the two of them now, two strangers bound by circumstances neither had chosen. "I thought you might wish to speak," he said, his voice steady but unreadable. She nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The flickering lantern light cast dancing shadows across his face, revealing details she had not noticed before, the sharpness of his gaze, the quiet intelligence behind his eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, at last, she broke the silence. "You knew, didn't you?" she asked. "You knew what this was meant to be." He exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. "Yes." "Then why did you agree?" A pause. A flicker of something deeper in his gaze. "Because I wanted to see," he said simply. "See what?" "If kindness can endure cruelty. If dignity can survive humiliation." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "And I have my answer." She held his gaze, searching for deception, for mockery, but found none. A realization settled over her like the whisper of a storm before it breaks. This was no ordinary beggar. And this was no ordinary engagement. Something was coming. And for the first time since this ordeal began, she felt the first stirrings of something new. Hope. The morning sun bathed the city in a golden hue, the marketplace already alive with the hum of merchants calling out their wares, children darting through narrow alleyways, and the scent of fresh bread wafting through the air. But within the grand estate, a storm brewed beneath the surface. The stepmother paced the lavish sitting room, her jeweled fingers tightening into fists. The engagement had not gone as planned. The girl had not begged for mercy, had not fled in disgrace. Instead, she had accepted the beggar without hesitation, defying every expectation. But the stepmother was not finished yet. She summoned the servants, instructing them to prepare a meager breakfast for the beggar: stale bread, watered down tea. Let him understand his place. Let him remember he was nothing. Moments later, the stepdaughter entered the dining hall, her simple dress a stark contrast to the wealth that surrounded her. The beggar was already seated, his posture relaxed as if he had dined in such halls before. She noticed the untouched food in front of him, the clear sign of her stepmother's insult. Without a word, she walked to his side, picked up the teapot, and poured him a fresh cup of warm tea from her own set. The room fell silent. The stepmother, watching from the doorway, clenched her jaw. The beggar met the girl's gaze, something flickering in his expression. A challenge. A test. You don't have to do this, he murmured. But I choose to, she replied, lifting her chin. A slow smile spread across his face, not of amusement, but of something far deeper. Interesting, he said, taking a sip. The stepmother's nails dug into her palms. This was not how things were meant to unfold. She had spent years ensuring the girl remained meek, overshadowed, powerless. Yet now, with nothing left to lose, the girl stood taller than ever before. The day passed in whispers. The servants spoke of the beggar's quiet confidence, of the stepdaughter's unwavering grace. Something was changing. And then, just as the stepmother sat down to dinner that evening, the butler entered, his face pale. "My lady," he stammered. "There is a visitor." A shadow crossed the doorway. The stepmother's breath caught as a man stepped into the room, not a beggar, but a figure draped in fine garments, his posture commanding, his expression unreadable. And then, with a voice that sent a chill through the room, he spoke. "It's time I introduced myself properly." Silence filled the grand dining hall as the man stepped fully into the light. Gone were the ragged clothes, the dirt-streaked face. In their place stood a man of wealth, power, and quiet authority. The very same beggar the stepmother had humiliated now stood before her as someone entirely different. The stepmother's face drained of color. "You," she whispered, gripping the table for support. The stepdaughter, too, stared in shock, but for a different reason. She had suspected there was more to him, but this? This was beyond anything she had imagined. With a composed smile, he stepped forward, his gaze locking onto the stepmother's. "I came to this house as a test," he said. "To see the true nature of those within it." His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of something undeniable: justice. The servants, who had once snickered at him, now stood frozen. The guests who had once looked down on him whispered among themselves, realization dawning too late. The stepmother forced a smile, her voice trembling. I had no idea." "But you did." His gaze hardened. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You saw someone you believed to be beneath you and treated them accordingly. Now, you must face the truth." He turned to the stepdaughter, his expression softening. "You, on the other hand, showed kindness where there was cruelty. Dignity where there was humiliation. And because of that, I choose you, not out of obligation, but because I have seen your heart." Tears welled in her eyes. "But, who are you?" He smiled. "A man who has seen the best and worst of people. And today, I choose to reward goodness." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an official document, a marriage contract, one that would legally bind them, not in shame, but in honor. The stepmother gasped, realization setting in that the power she once held had slipped through her fingers. Before she could protest, he spoke again. "And as for you," he addressed the stepmother, his tone now cold, "you will answer for your cruelty. No longer will you live in comfort at the expense of others." A knock sounded at the door. Two men in official robes stepped inside, legal authorities, there to settle matters of inheritance and justice. The stepmother collapsed into a chair, her fate sealed. As for the stepdaughter, she had not only found a husband, but also her freedom. A life where she would no longer be a pawn in someone else's game. And so, fate delivered its lesson. Kindness was never weakness. Silence was never surrender. And true wealth was not measured in gold, but in the strength of one's heart. This has been another powerful story from Storytelling and Beyond, where every tale carries a lesson, every twist a meaning. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Join us on this journey of inspiring, thought-provoking stories that challenge perspectives and uplift souls. See you in the next story.